the Korean Mafia boss, laughed when his family threw me out pregnant. He didn't know his rival had already claimed me and his heir. The night Shin Tae-jun finally came for me, I was already standing in the arms of the man who had replaced him. I was 7 months pregnant in a gold ballroom gown, my belly round and full and visible to every person in that gilded room. Kwon Dae-oh stood behind me, his tattooed hand resting on my stomach. Not possessively, not as performance, gently. The way a man touches something he has decided is permanently his. Tae-jun saw us from across the room, and the sound he made, that involuntary, fractured sound, was not rage, not grief exactly. It was the specific sound a man makes when he finally, completely, understands what he has already destroyed. Let me tell you how we got there. My name is Lena Cross, and 4 months before that ballroom, I was still making the Shin family's coffee exactly the way they liked it, and pretending not to notice the way they looked through me every single morning like I was part of the furniture. I had been with Shin Tae-jun for 2 years, not the front door kind of being with someone, not the kind that gets announced at family dinners, the kind that lives in private, in late-night kitchens and long silences, and the specific intimacy of being trusted with someone's worst hours. I was his private chef. That was how it started. I cooked for his personal floor, kept irregular hours, signed NDAs I barely had time to read. What I didn't sign was a document saying I would fall for him. Nobody puts that in the paperwork. His family, his mother Madam Shin Bokhui, his older brother Taemin, his cousin Ryun, who ran southern operations, were civil to me the way you are civil to staff. Pleasant enough when Tae-jun was in the room. Something else entirely when he wasn't. Madam Shin said it to me, once plainly, in the kitchen at 9 in the morning. She set her tea down and looked at me the way you look at something you've already decided you're returning. My son is generous with his attention, she said. Not quite to me. But generosity and permanence are different things. I kept chopping vegetables. I didn't turn around. Are we clear? She said. Perfectly, I told her. She picked up her tea and walked out. I kept telling myself it was class politics. A powerful family protecting bloodlines from inconvenience. I told myself Tae-jun knew what we had, knew its weight, and that eventually he would make it visible. I told myself a lot of things in those 2 years, until the morning I took a test in his private bathroom and learned that everything I had been telling myself was about to be tested in a way I had not planned for. I was 8 weeks along before I found the words to tell him. I was not afraid of Tae-jun, the man I had spent 2 years learning, the one who sat quietly at the kitchen counter at midnight when he couldn't sleep, who carried a specific loneliness inside all that power. That man I was not afraid of. I was afraid of what would happen when he had to choose. I told him on a Tuesday, in his office. Door closed. I placed the test on the desk in front of him and waited. He looked at it for a long time, then he said, "My mother cannot know yet, not, are you all right? Not, this changes things, not my name. My mother cannot know yet." I stood there and absorbed it. "Okay," I said. I walked out. But Madam Shin always knew things before she was supposed to. By Thursday she knew, and she did not confront me quietly. She called a family meeting. I found out about it the way I found out about most things in that house. I was already in the room when it started. I had brought tea into the council gathering. Routine, 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 and was about to leave when Madam Shin's voice stopped me. "Stay, Lena." Everyone was seated. Taemin, Ryun, 2 senior council members. And Madam Shin at the head of the table like she had always been the true authority in that room, which she had. "My son has apparently been less careful than a man in his position ought to be," she said. To the table, not to me. Like I was not standing 5 feet away. There is a situation that requires management. A situation. I was standing in their council room in my chef's whites, carrying this man's child, and she was describing it as a situation that required management. Taemin leaned back in his chair with the look of a man who found this mildly entertaining. "What kind of management?" "The clean kind," she said. I looked at Tae-jun. He was looking at the table. That same wood grain, that same silence. "This cannot become public," Tae-jun said quietly. "Not now, not with her. I stood very still, not with her. Like I was a category of problem, a variable that complicated a cleaner equation. She'll be compensated fairly, he added. 2 sentences that together told me exactly what 2 years had been worth on his internal ledger. I picked up my empty tray. I walked to the door. Behind me, Tae-min said something that made 2 council members laugh. I didn't catch the exact words, but I heard the tone. The specific register of men dismissing something they were relieved to be finished with. I walked out. And here is what nobody in that room knew yet. 1 week before that meeting, while I was still deciding whether to tell Tae-jun, someone else had already found out. Let me tell you about Kwon Dae-oh. In the architecture of Tae-jun's world, Kwon's name changed the atmosphere of every room it entered. His rival, his equal by every operational measure, and in several respects his superior. Where the Shin Empire was built on inheritance and legacy, Kwon had built his with his hands, his mind, and a discipline that people who crossed him only understood in retrospect. I had met him exactly twice. The first time he had come for a negotiation I was not supposed to hear. I was in the kitchen, and he'd walked in himself to refill his water glass. No aid, no announcement. He looked at me. You cook everything on this floor? Yes. Good food, he said. Set the glass down, walked back out. The second time was 3 weeks before the council meeting. I was leaving through the side entrance after a late shift. He was outside his car on a call. He glanced up when I came through the door. He ended the call. You look tired, he said. Nobody in that building said things like that to me. You look tired. Like my condition was something worth noticing. Long shift, I said. He nodded. Be careful going home. I didn't know what to do with that. I went home. What I learned later, what he told me himself, months after, was that he had already known about the pregnancy. His intelligence network tracked every variable inside Tae-jun's household that touched operational security. My situation had entered his awareness within days. He had known before Madam Shin had, before Tae-jun had fully processed what it meant. And he had decided quietly and without announcement what he was going to do about it. I stayed in Tae-jun's building for 2 more weeks after the council meeting. I kept doing my job. I kept my face neutral. I waited, because even then, even knowing what I knew, some part of me was waiting for him to come to me privately and say something that changed the shape of what had happened. He came to the kitchen on a Wednesday evening, alone, stood at the counter. My mother wants you moved out by end of week, he said. I know, I said. I've arranged 6 months of compensation and a letter of reference. I set down the knife I was holding, very carefully, turned around and looked at him directly. 6 months, I said. He didn't flinch. The child will be. Don't, I said. Don't finish that sentence. He stopped. The door opened. Madam Shin walked in, and behind her Tae-min. And I understood this had been coordinated. This was the exit, stage-managed and staffed. I think we've been quite reasonable, Madam Shin said, looking at the envelope on the counter. More than most would be. Tae-min was already on his phone, bored, the way you look when a meeting has run 2 minutes past its useful life. And then Madam Shin looked at me, pleasantly, like she was genuinely curious about something, and said, You really thought you were going to be a Shin, a girl like you. The room went completely still. I looked at Tae-jun. He looked away. And then, and this is the part that followed me for months, that found me at 3 in the morning and refused to leave. He looked away first. Then he gave a low, quiet laugh. Not loud, not joyful, worse than both. The laugh of a man who is relieved. The specific private laugh of someone for whom a complicated inconvenience has finally been handled. It lasted only a second, but I heard everything inside it. I picked up the envelope. I did not open it. I held it at my side. Thank you for the hospitality, I said, to the room in general. I walked out of that kitchen, out of that building, into the cold-lit city. I stood on the pavement. My phone rang. I stared at the screen. He had never called me before. I hadn't given him my number. That fact alone should have told me something about the breadth of what I was walking toward. I answered. I heard, he said. No preamble. That was fast, I said. Good information. Where are you right now? Outside the building. Don't go to a hotel. I'm sending a car. I don't need Lena, just my name. Said the way you say something that you mean to land. Not commanding. Something quieter than that. Like asking for trust with the weight of the word alone. I stayed on the pavement. The car arrived in 9 minutes. Let me tell you about the first morning I woke up in Kwon Dae-oh's household, because this is where the story changes texture, where the weight shifts enough to breathe. I came down to his kitchen at 7 in the morning, expecting emptiness. Instead, I found a tiny woman, approximately 70 years old, seated at the kitchen island, eating rice porridge with the full authority of someone who owned everything she could see. She looked up, looked at my stomach, pointed at the chair across from her. Sit, she said. You look hungry. Hungry mother, hungry baby. I'm sorry. Who are you? Kwon Dae-oh's grandmother. Yoon Cha-soon. She was already reaching for a second bowl. You call me Mama Yoon. Sit before I have to say it again. I sat. Mama Yoon had opinions about everything. The porridge temperature, my exact week of pregnancy. The general intelligence of men who let good women walk out into the cold. She delivered these opinions continuously and without apology. My grandson, she said, pushing the bowl across, has been watching you for a long time. You know that? He sent a car, I said. That's not watching. He sent a car at 10 at night for a pregnant woman standing alone on a pavement. She tilted her head. In 40 years of this family, this kitchen has not had a guest in the East Wing. You are the first. I looked down at my bowl. Eat, she said. You already decided to trust us on that pavement last night. Eat. I picked up the spoon, and something in me, something that had been braced and guarded and exhausted for weeks, released, very slightly, by about 1 degree. In the weeks that followed, I want to be precise. He did not pursue me. He did not make speeches. He was not interested in drama or declarations or anything that required an audience. What he did was simpler and harder to deflect. He arranged for the city's best obstetric team to be on call. He had my belongings moved without being asked. He began scheduling himself home for dinner 3 nights a week and never mentioned it. I only noticed because Mama Yoon pointed it out. He hasn't come home early like this since before his father died, she told me over tea. Just so you know. Once, when I'd fallen asleep reading in the library, I woke to find a blanket tucked around me and water placed by my hand. He was already gone. No note, no acknowledgement. Just, he had noticed, and he had done something about it, and he didn't need recognition for it. He was building something, quietly, without requiring my participation. One evening, sitting across from me at the kitchen table while Mama Yoon watched her program in the next room, he said, looking at his tea, not at me. When the baby comes, whatever you decide after, whether you stay or leave, the child will never want for anything. That is not conditional on you. It's already decided. I looked at him. Why? I asked. He met my eyes. Because that child is innocent, he said. Innocents shouldn't have to pay for other people's choices. He paused at the door. Didn't turn around. Said the next part to the hallway. And whether the world understands it yet or not, that child is already under my name. He carried his cup to the sink and walked out. I sat there for a long time. There were other moments. Smaller ones that added up to something I couldn't argue with. A Sunday morning, when he brought me tea without asking, and then sat at the far end of the kitchen reading documents, not speaking, just present. And I realized I had not been that comfortable in someone's silence since I was a child in my grandmother's house. An afternoon when he came home early and found me on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, exhausted and aching, and didn't say anything about it. Just sat down on the floor beside me with his back against the cabinet too, and stayed there until I was ready to stand up. The night I heard him on a call in his study, voice low and precise and final, and through the cracked door I caught one sentence. She is under this roof. That means she is under my protection. Anyone who moves against her moves against me. He didn't know I had heard it. He never brought it up. I didn't know what to do with a man who protected things quietly, who didn't need to announce his intentions to feel real about them. Mama Yoon appeared in the doorway with her reading glasses on her head and said, without any preamble whatsoever, "Well, what exactly are you waiting for, child? The man is not going to write you a letter." While I was learning how to exhale again in a house that felt increasingly like home, Tae-jun was doing what men like him do when they realize they've miscalculated. He sent an intermediary to Kwon's offices with a financial offer. It described my situation as a loose end that could be resolved through the appropriate transfer. Kwon's response, delivered through his chief of staff Park Sung-min, was one sentence. "Tell Shin that Lena Cross is not a loose end. She is a guest in my home, and my home is not a negotiation table." Tae-jun then tried to reach me directly. 3 calls over 2 days. I declined them all. He then sent a handwritten letter, which was unusual enough to notice, acknowledging in careful language that the situation had been handled poorly and that we should speak. I read it once, placed it in the library drawer. When Mama Yoon found it during tidying and read it without a trace of embarrassment, "She came to find me in the garden. He says handled poorly," she said. "Yes, not I was wrong, not I failed you, not I'm sorry." She made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a verdict. "He is apologizing for his logistics, not for himself." I looked at her. "Mama Yoon," I said, "have you always been this sharp?" "Since birth," she said, "sharp and correct. Now come inside. It is cold and you are carrying my great-grandchild." 3 weeks before the birth, Kwon Dae-oh was required to attend the Seoul Alliance Gala, the annual gathering of every significant organization in the city. The kind of event where presence is political and absence is its own message. He asked me, quietly and without pressure, if I wanted to come. I knew Tae-jun would be there. "Yes," I said. Mama Yoon, who had apparently been listening from the hallway, appeared with a measuring tape and what turned out to be extremely specific opinions about gold embroidery. The night of the gala, I stood in front of the mirror, in a cream and gold gown that moved with my body instead of against it. And, for the first time in months, I felt like a person who was exactly where she was supposed to be. Kwon appeared in the doorway. He looked at me for a moment. "You don't have to do this," he said. "I know," I said. He offered his arm. We walked in together. I felt the room shift when we entered. Not the dramatic film version. Not everyone stopping, gasping, turning. The subtler version. The room becoming aware of something it hadn't expected. Adjustments made in posture and conversation without acknowledgement. Kwon moved through it with the ease of a man who has never required a room's approval. His hand settled at the small of my back, steady, present, not performing anything for anyone. We had been there perhaps 40 minutes when I saw Tae-jun across the hall. He saw me in the same instant. I watched his face process it. The gold dress, the belly, the room. And then, slowly, who was standing beside me, whose hand was at my back. I held his gaze. Kwon noticed. He said nothing. He simply placed his hand gently on my stomach, not claiming, not theatre, just grounding, reminding me of what was real and present and already decided. Tae-jun began moving toward us. The room noticed now. Conversations tapered. People adjusted their positions with the careful discretion of those who are watching while pretending not to. He stopped a few feet away. He looked at Kwon, then at me. "Lena." My name in his voice, and I noticed, absently, how long it had been since he had said it, with the full weight of his attention behind it. Too late for that to be useful. "Shin Tae-jun," I said, professionally. He looked at Kwon's hand on my belly. "Is the child." He stopped himself. "Is this?" Mine, Kwon said, one word. No aggression, no performance. The quiet tone of a man stating a fact he has already decided is permanent. The room had stopped pretending entirely. Tae-jun's jaw tightened. "You don't have to do this," he said to Kwon low. "This is between her and me." "It was," Kwon said. "You resolved it." The resolution brought her to my door. Everything after that moment is mine. "Lena." Tae-jun turned to me directly, and there it was, finally in a gilded room full of witnesses, the thing I had spent 2 years waiting for. The full undivided weight of him. I made a mistake. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the kitchen, about handled poorly, about the specific sound of a man exhaling, when a complicated situation finally resolves itself. Yes, I said, you did let me. No, cleanly. Not with anger. I had spent the anger privately over months, in a library chair with a blanket tucked around me. What remained was something steadier. There is nothing to let you do, nothing to negotiate. This is not a loose end. I felt Kwon's hand settle a degree warmer. This is my family, I said. The sound Tae-jun made. I will remember it for a long time, not rage. The sound of a man who has understood. At the exact moment understanding becomes useless, what he was actually holding when he let go. Madame Shin appeared from somewhere to his left. She looked at my belly, at Kwon, at me. For once, no words. Even she did not have a sentence for this particular room. And then Mama Yoon, who I had not known was attending, who had apparently arranged her own invitation without informing anyone, wearing a suit with more pearls than was strictly necessary, materialized beside me, took my free arm firmly, and announced to the assembled hall at a volume that was absolutely deliberate. My grandson has always had exceptional taste. Now, is there actual food at this event, or are we all just standing here looking at each other? Laughter moved through the room like a wave releasing, and the entire weight of everything that had been tense and held and braced dissolved all at once into something that felt against all odds, like relief. 6 weeks later, I gave birth to a son, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, dark eyes, already fierce. Kwon Dae-oh sat beside the bed for the entire duration and did not leave once. When they placed the baby in his arms, he stood completely still, and I watched the steadiest man I had ever known become briefly, entirely undone by something smaller than his forearm. Mama Yoon, outside in the corridor, could be heard informing the nursing staff that she had known this was coming from. The morning she made porridge for a pregnant stranger and told her to sit down. We named him Jae-won. Here is what I know now that I did not know when I was standing in that cold kitchen holding a severance envelope. Being carried out of a room does not mean you were small. It means the room could not hold you. Tae-jun was never going to choose me. Not because of what I lacked, but because choosing me would have required him to be a different kind of man than the one he had decided to be. Some men choose legacy over love. Some men choose image over everything. You cannot fault water for being cold. You can only decide how long you will stand in it. Kwon Dae-oh never asked me to stay. He built a reason to and left the door open. That is the difference between a man who needs you smaller so he can feel larger, and a man whose fullness has room for yours. I did not replace a loss. I arrived finally at a beginning. My name is Lena Cross. They threw me out pregnant and called it management. Shin Tae-jun laughed because he thought I had nowhere to go. His mother said, "A girl like you," because she thought that settled it. But his rival had already opened the door, claimed my child as his own, and made me family. I walked out carrying the heir they rejected. And I walked into the empire that chose us both.